My name is Leo Gilling, coming to you from the Rastafari Indigenous village over in Montego Bay. And just now we were talking about policy and government and so forth. Now, when I walked into this place here earlier with you, you pointed to a house at the top and you said, that's the man responsible for the village. You know, you said, well, not
but
that
sharing is land.
Sharing. Yes.
He's not responsible. That's a misconception.
No. You know me, what happened is sometimes our language tends to be different. All right? Yeah. But you pointed to the house and you said, you know, that man is an important man. He helped us to be here. Yeah. He shared something under an abnormal circumstances. So explain that to me, for me.
Well, the Nelson family, you know, the name of the family is the Nelson family, and they see themselves as a unit. Right. But the person I'm talking about is a former MP. Oh, okay. His name is Arthur Nelson. And this man is a very, very interesting human being. You know, Rastafari live to burn Babylon. Right. And this man is a representative, of Babylon in his former life and journey. You know, and that was and when he heard, you know, the concept that we had and so on, you know, being socialist at heart, he decided that he was really going to share his property with, you know, a group of people that is really discriminated against in our island. And every time I speak about him, you know, to show how serious his contribution has been to share this land with us, because nobody was going to really give us, you know, 30 acres to play around with. And he actually lives on this 30 acres as well. That's why I was showing you his house. Right. And so we set out to create this village, knowing that the world had to be lit. And he made that first step of actually giving us a land to do it on. So the essence of Rastafari, it speaks to a much, why did we need land though? You know, and that's another part of the story. But to really speak to how serious it is that this man was able to do that, no Rastafari will do what he did.
Tell us about that part.
Well, I mean, you know, we are here, of course, Mr. Nelson and his family is not a group of people that use the sacrament. Right. You know, and we are here, we are free to do whatever we do. We use our sacrament right in the presence. Our spaces, living spaces are very close. Yes. We have African words that we use that are considered to be bad words, you know. and being so close to and he doesn't use these words. And I am very sure that no Rastaman would give any so-called quote-unquote ballhead the right to use their land to jerk pork. You understand what I mean?
I found that quite profound.
Yeah, we would never do that. We would never know that a man is going to come and put forward himself that he's going to represent, you know, a Jamaican culture, and part of that is the jerk pork and jerk chicken, and we give him the land to do that at all. Rastafari would never do that. And it caused me to look deeply into ourselves, you know.
Because I was going to ask you, what then made you accept the proposal from him, knowing that that's Babylon, and Babylon I give you something, you know, to start out with, right?
Well, first it developed over time. I never saw it in the beginning. I never saw the act of benevolence so deep in the beginning. You understand?
All right.
So it was over time after I started to look at it and realize how we conducted ourselves, and realize how tolerant he was of this conduct. Yes. You know, it just popped up in my head that I would never do this.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I consider myself to be a very, you know, reasonable, as we say, we are in a relationship and so on, you know, but we would be very judgmental. Yes. And that is just based on the fact that Rastafari see animals as, we don't eat, we don't have health food, we have love food. Right. We don't eat animals because we want to live longer. It's only because we think that there are fellow inhabitants of the earth that have the right to be here.
Fellow, that's an important word.
Yeah, very important word. Yes, so as a result of that, that is our stance and why we don't eat meat. You know, so, but this man was able to look past the fact that he's very serious, you know, about not using marijuana and so on. But he was able to look past that and see a much bigger picture and still share the property with us. So, you know, I take my hat off to Mr. Nelson any day, every day. Arthur Nelson.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, man, former politician of the People's National Party. And as I cannot define him through politics.
Okay.
I have to define him through humanity.
And that's really nice.
Yeah, and that's true. You know, but with all his kind deeds, it still speak to why would a community that is connected to an ecosystem, we are people of the earth. Rastafari is about the land, but we own no land. We have no rights to any land. And yes, we have a role to play in that, because Rastafari was always on the mission of repatriation, denouncing the Jamaican land as our home. You will never go into a Rastafari space and see the colors of the Jamaican flag, because we do not have that type of a relationship with Jamaica, right? It's only the red, gold and green you would see in a Rastafari space.
Right.
But still, at the same time, as our relationship has evolved, we find out that, you know, we have the Maroons have an ecosystem that they are connected to. The people of Dakota who are fighting for pipelines going through their space, they are connected to an ecosystem. But for us as Rastafari, the only property we have is the property that is in our mind, our intellectual property. The things that we create, our food, our colors, our music. You know, those are the property that we own right now. We do not own any land. And for any movement to survive, the first thing you need is land. So as kind as Mr. Arthur Nelson has been, it has not necessarily solved the problem, because, you know, it still comes with a level of restriction. You know, there are levels of do's and don'ts, you know, consultation that we have to have, and it's a necessary process for us as a community to be able to go through those type of relationship. But in terms of our full expression, nowhere in the Rastafari community there is a serious level of land ownership. And this is why we are still fighting this battle with Pinnacle, because the 500 acres that were acquired by our forefather Leonard P. Howell, the first Rasta village, has been taken away from that family.
I'm gonna speak to that. Back in with the Marcus Garvey movement, there were some Rastas that were repatriated to Sashamane. Is it right?
Sashamane.
Sashamane, yes. Right?
Yeah.
And I remember reading somewhere where that land right was taken away from them
as well.
Right? Okay.
As well.
Okay. And then, okay. My question to you then is, if you are given, or if you are been in a position to own land rights, would you then fly the Jamaican flag?
No.
Okay.
Because our reason for not flying the Jamaican flag, it has nothing to do with the land situation. Our reason for not flying the Jamaican flag is to hold a memory of the fact that we were brought here through imposition.
Gotcha.
And that the original people of the land were totally extinct within 30 years of Columbus landing on this space, which is the Taínos. And so for us, it's a very symbolic move not to recognize that. And if it would only take for the Jamaican government to sort of put that in a level of narrative for its people to see exactly why we are doing that. And if we redefine that process of the colors of the flag, not necessarily to make them African, but to make the people be educated about why we chose those colors, then of course we then will be a part of an inclusive process that decide what those colors are and what they should look.
Could you remind me of why that 500 acre was taken away from
Leonard P. Howell?
Leonard P. Howell.
Well, it's a whole. It comes against the reference of discrimination.
Okay.
You know, Rastafari was not meant to own anything. So the 500 acres, the developers, you know, some scheme between how the land just become prime land, and as a result of that, you know, whatever paperwork was there was totally destroyed, and as a result of that, you know, it was just taken away from our community.
Okay.
But it is definitely a historical space, because now that Rastafari is recognized in this way, you know, so we're the exact location where that was occupied by Leonard P. Howell has always been secured by the Rastafari community. We made our presence there all the time, and now there are a lot of discussions between the government and Rastafari as how we move to solve this problem. We do have our internal issues as well, you know, in terms of how it should be done, and so on and so forth. So, you know, it's a journey that we're on, you know.
Okay. And as far as the Rastafari Indigenous village is concerned, after I met you in Kingston, I knew that I wanted to talk to you, but then I went back to our program and couldn't find where you were in there, and only later on the ministry pointed to me that you're under tourism, because I was looking everywhere else and I overlooked tourism. So I know that the Indigenous village, their spotlight at the conference had to do with community tourism. Tell us about what it is that you do at the Rastafari Indigenous village, so that everybody can know what it is, and then we can talk about bringing people here for everybody to see what's going on here.
Well, the truth of the matter is, it's a very weird again relationship, because when we decided that we were going to do this, the word for tourism within our community is tourism.
Explain that for me first.
So the Rastafari community see tourism as something that prostitute the land and prostitute the people.
Gotcha. All right.
Put your lives on a show, and it's a packaged reality. Yes. And as a result of that, our community has taken a very serious stance against it. So once we decided to do this, it was almost like we were against our community as well.
That's exactly right. Okay.
So, but being faced with extinction as a community, desperate measures were definitely needed. We were finding out that people wanted to know more about the Rastafari community. And in fact, there was this group from out of California, 100 women, started by a lady called Joan Cornwell. She started what was called the Sister Locks movement. And she had a clientele of 100 women, and they were celebrating their 10th anniversary and decided that they wanted to do it in Jamaica. And because we had a connection, they wanted to see, locks was becoming this new thing around the world, and Rastafari is the vanguard.
Isn't that strange?
Yes, exactly. So they decided that they wanted to come into a Rastafari space to experience the root of this. So we got very scared seeing that 100 women would be moving from out of the ports, of Montego Bay, loaded on buses, heading up to the hills to check Rastafari. And we just thought we were going to have a very serious problem with the government.
Yes.
And as a result of that, we decided to go and check TPDCO to let them know that this was going to happen, and to invite them to see that outside of their standards and all of these things, Jamaica in its real estate was attractive.
Absolutely.
And without all your criterias and so on and so forth, we could still do it. Mm-hmm. So you should develop new criterias which would name Leave Us Alone. So we invited them to do this. And of course, that was when we sort of met our navigator, which is Arlene Mackenzie.
You spoke of Arlene today.
Yes.
Okay.
A very, very important component towards community development is to have an interpreter
Mm-hmm.
that can actually tell you what the hell Babylon is saying.
All right.
We didn't understand the language of the system, and she came and they looked at what we were doing, and she sort of convinced us, the word convinced us enough that if we come into the system, we could bring a change to the system.
That's great thought.
Yes, and that our role could actually transform what was happening around us because we found out that people were very concerned about the reef and all the fishes that were dying out, but they were not concerned about us.
And neither the green, right,
who survived from the land.
Right.
Like Rastafari need coconut to do everything.
Right.
And we are the ones recognizing that based on the policies that the government were creating for tourism, yes, because when they decided to build a lot of these hotels, these were places where we were getting special herbs from. And nobody decided to preserve these herbs. They didn't even know that they were there. So a part of our lobby actually started by saying to NEPA that, listen, you need to even say to the hoteliers that if they take these special herbs first, identify them, put them in a unique space, and it will give you a lot of track record internationally because you're preserving the environment.
Yes.
And to speak to the government about its policies of developing housing schemes, that if you do have a space, you choose a property of 400 acres to build 4,000 houses, but nowhere on that property you decide to recognize the plants that give us oxygen and their role that they play
in healthcare,
in just life, yes, in general.
Yes,
yes. For children to know who they are and what those plants would represent. No space in a backyard to plant. Only a little part where you can hang up some clothes, and everybody have a concrete backyard. Right. We realize that we are faced with extinction based on these policies. So Arlene Mackenzie was the one that said to us, fight it from inside. Fight it by becoming the policy. And we decided that, Jamaica and the world will have to take the responsibility for creating this space.
Well, I was very impressed because Arlene must be right, because I met you at the conference. I met you at conference. So you creating something that is different, and you are creating the policy. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right?
We take our hats off to her, because if she was not necessarily there to say to the government what exactly we are saying,
yes,
and tell us exactly what they are saying, I'm not sure if we would,
Yes,
there was definitely a language barrier. So when you look at a document that is speaking about the rights of any people, any one of these conventions, yes, it is English language, but the way how they speak it, there's no way you can understand it.
I don't understand it.
Yeah, these repetitive lawyer jargons, that are there. It's totally something that is just out of clarity. So as a result of that, we really needed somebody like Arlene Mackenzie to sort of, and people like that around the world, the country style tourism, Diane McIntyre Pike, and all of these other people who are there to ensure that community language can be transferred, and that we can also see what people are calling international standards.
All right, so we're coming from the Rastafari Indigenous village. I'm speaking to First Man,
yes,
and I'm not going to call his mother's name. We'll be right back. Okay, we were talking about the cockpit country.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, so one of the things that happened at the diaspora, which was very, very interesting, was, after I made my presentation, I really met a lady. I can't remember her name right
Diana
now.
Macaulay?
I'm not sure, but she's in Ocho-Rios though.
Oh, no, okay.
Yes, and she was really speaking about, a level, the bird watching, and, the ecotourism component.
I remember her.
And it is strange to me that we are not tapping into the future of our economics, which is the protection of our environment. Jamaica has such an advantage based on our environment, and the cockpit country stands center into that. Mm-hmm. Because most of our species, most of our what we would call endemic species are in the cockpit country. That is where it is best represented, in the cockpit country. Yes. And as a result of that, you know, the advantage that we have with these endemic species, the level of you know, visitors that can come to our country because of our environment, where the world is really growing in this direction. And that was what we're really urging for, you know, for the people of the diaspora to really bring to the table this garbage management, because we're convinced that refusal to accept our environment is totally in line with why Jamaica has so much crime.
Because my understanding is that they're trying to
do backside mining in the cockpit country, and it is very short-sighted, yes, to actually think to yourself that the dollar figure that is going to come from bauxite is going to be sustainable. It is not sustainable. It's not a sustainable approach. But if we look at the dollar figure that can come from our environment, and the fact that it is not going to be for a big corporation, but it is going to be for the people, then we are speaking about something that is very, very different. And there are loads of templates around the world that will show us that this industrial move that we are on, we can't even compete.
Right. My understanding is that there are animals up there that are just basically endemic to that,
to Jamaica and to that space.
That space, right?
Exactly. And as a result of that, instead of putting that in a context where it gives us this advantage of emissaries and protectorate of Mother Earth, and see the value that is represented within that protection of Mother Earth. And this is why I'm saying Jamaica has missed it by thinking of themselves as a brand instead of a stance. Because if Jamaica see the stance of itself being a place that protects our mother, which is the earth, what we will get from that in return, it cannot necessarily be measured.
Is there a balance then between Mother Earth and industry?
There has to be a balance between Mother Earth and industry. And this is where I think we are losing the calculations. There is nobody that is actually putting it down on paper.
Yes.
Right? So we create debts and loans and damage to the environment that we can't necessarily pay for in the future. And if when we calculate, we only calculate according to the material, and we don't calculate according to the spiritual and according to the social,
environmental,
and according to the environmental, if we do not have those columns
yes,
in our tabulation,
yes,
then of course what you're going to find is something that doesn't even fix an immediate problem, but something that creates a problem, because all it is about is the statistics of employment instead of the statistics of life.
All right. Just talk to us now about the Rastafari Indigenous Village. What is it about? Where are you going to go with, where are we going with the village? What do you see 5 years down the line? Tell us.
Well, the truth is the village is really a template that we have been following based on the first Rastafari village, which is the one in Pinnacle that was destroyed.
Right.
Where it is a total relationship with life, and that relationship being your existence and your possibility for your day-to-day work, your day-to-day spirituality, your day-to-day health, you know, the essence that you don't have to import anything to live.
You can live right here.
You can live right here. And so we took this brave step of coming into the bushes across a river. Very difficult access.
I tell you, I was when I was driving down today. First of all, I like the idea that you asked me if I have a problem walking across the river. I would not have a problem walking across the river, but I was by myself. I don't know which part I go, right?
Right.
So I preferred the route, but you took a very scenic route through is that Irwin?
Yes, that's
Irwin,
yeah,
right?
Man, that's Irwin.
It was really different because I haven't been anywhere in this kind
bad roads.
Yeah, that's okay.
You know, everything that everybody would think that would be a deterrent.
Yes.
We just came around here, raised our flag.
Yes.
And of course it's a little bit more than just raising our flag, because you know one of the things that came out of this whole tourism thing is all the regulations and standard. 22 different licensing things that you have to go through.
Is that right?
To be able to, yes,
Okay.
to be able to do, to host visitors and insurances and things that community will never be able to manage or sustain.
But you said something that you were the only, no, there's the first.
First.
Ecotourism.
That has been registered and export ready.
Ah, okay,
Right?
okay.
So Rastafari Indigenous Village, and this happened from our inception, 2009. You know, kudos to Arlene McKenzie, who was really, you know, manager of the tourism product development here in Montego Bay. So she understands the standards, and she actually take us through the process of doing that. So, but it is a remarkable achievement. The fact that we've done that from 2009, and there are so much community tourism enterprises that are just struggling and are deemed illegal because these red tapes are so hard to burst. You know,
right. and then you took me around today to the various segments of the village. Tell us about. I want you to tell me about the planting of what did you call that bed? The bedding.
Yes.
Right. Tell us about the bedding and what you did.
Well, I'll just go through the whole, you know, the village concept.
Fine.
So it is a horizontal society. The philosophy of Rastafari Indigenous Village had to be the philosophy of Rastafari.
Right.
So we had to find some level of a business model that would represent the way how we think as a horizontal society.
Business model.
Yes, we had to find a business model for our culture.
Right.
And registered as a limited liability company was not necessarily the business model that we would choose. People would more think that we would go to a cooperative.
Okay.
Right? But the limited liability company didn't have the red tapes that the cooperative had.
I see.
And it would have trust our community into a space where, you know, you'd be doing ton loads of meetings against our nature and documentation against our nature. So what the limited liability company gave us an opportunity to foster our informal behavior into some kind of a formality and to build the trust amongst ourselves and so on and so forth. So these were important steps that we had to make in the beginning. So we decided that, you know, Rastafari does not have a hierarchy in our thinking. So in creating the space, it's almost like the village is a umbrella organization or umbrella registration for all of what is represented in the village. So every individual, King Toto, he owns his drum business. Yes? The person who operates the kitchen, they own that kitchen business. The person who operates the soap making, they own their soap making business. So it is one space of many owners. Yes? And that was very, very interesting because it is the Rastafari thinking of equality that would cause us to operate like this. It's a little bit more difficult because everything that we have to do is to transform all these informal minds into a structure that would say, okay, we are going to recognize that the government needs some tax. You understand? And that we are also going to recognize the fact that you as an individual now have to transform yourself into an owner of yourself. And
also to get grants, right? To get grants.
Yes, and the grants were very, very important in that kind of a beginning, and it became very difficult for the grant people because the grant people love to see employment.
Yes, they do.
While we were only looking at ownership.
Right.
So you know, we had to really sort of present. So everybody wants it at the end of it. Okay, the outcomes. How many people did you employ? We don't employ anybody because everybody is an owner of their own space.
I got you.
So it became something that was unique within the whole ambience of this creation, you know. So the farm is owned by someone, and everybody is agreed to make $0 to $1 million. Yes. So the essence is ownership of yourself, of your space, of your vision, of your direction.
Well, you just created something that that doesn't exist anywhere else out there.
Well, you know, and that we would hope a lot of people would see and know that it is possible. It is really, really possible for individuals to find their own path within a collective. You know, and that's the essence of personhood, where you as an individual is a part and recognize yourself as a part of a bigger relationship. And it is from that relationship you survive. So the message of Rastafari Indigenous Village is not so much about these buildings or the things that whatever. It's a concept that we have created for ourselves that we are working on to ensure that it becomes sustainable.
So are you, in the next 4 or 5 years, see other type of enterprising opportunities being created inside of the village? Or
yeah, man, it's an ongoing thing, and this is why we call ourselves the Ing people. We are always growing, becoming, you know. The
Ing people.
Yeah, the Ing people, the Ing people. So the essence of what we do here is to, if you come here as a villager, a Rastafari person, you do not have something, we can actually give you something to do, which is your own.
it's your own.
Yeah, because there is so much possibilities. If we can give you and say, okay, you can be the juice man.
Okay. All right.
You know,
Yes,
you
yes.
can be the dry fruits man.
Yes, yes.
You know, you can be the farmer. You can be the agro processor. It's unlimited, and it's not just the Rastafari. When you look at the Maroon community, they equally. When you look at any community in Jamaica, equally you could find a role that any individual could play for the development of themselves and their wider community. And that is the philosophy of Rastafari, a philosophy of harmony, which is showing that, and that's why our music is so important to us, because everyone plays a different beat, everyone makes a different sound, but it still comes together to make one music. So music is really the essence of our life. It shows us that our philosophy of unity is possible through the function of harmony.
Speaking of music, the Saturday, last Saturday,
Yes.
when you guys got together at the last
Yeah,
minute
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
put together music,
Yeah.
I loaded it up on Facebook,
Yes.
and within one day I had 3,200 people.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that.
Just like that. And failure to see music as an example for life. You know, when 15 different people are on one stage, all playing something different,
Yes.
and creating
Yes.
different beats,
Yes.
and then it still
So
comes as one sound.
That was great, wasn't it, man?
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
And so we use this as our guide to show us that all things are possible.
Yes.
And that humanity don't necessarily have a problem, because every day we show
Harmony.
by living in harmony
Yes.
how we can create oneness.
All right, so tell the diaspora, invite them over to the Indigenous Village.
Yeah, so Rastafari Indigenous Village is a space for humanity. It's a space for the human family. It's a space where, you know, the simple things around your environment are being transformed into special and unique relationship for human beings. You know, our drums are something, you know, your Jump
Yes,
for Life.
Jump
you
for
know,
Life.
and to know that we are the ones who actually make these drums that are impacting on children. And you know, when I saw Saturday,
Yes.
the children playing the drums and what it did to them, people are coming from an inner city community where all they can hear is gunshots and
Yes.
and bad mind and so on, and then to see them transform into poets and musicians and so on
that was
within
just
a short moment
Yes,
of time,
yes.
really just anger you when it is about stimulation and not a sustainable approach of a program to ensure that you can move people through partnerships into another stage of themselves. And the essence of Rastafari is that partnership. So when you come to the village, you will see a lot of your grandmother.
Yes.
The things that
so you're
you
gonna
would
teach us to hit the drums too, just like we did last week.
the essence of the things of yesterday, which you would have thrown away. Rastafari Indigenous Village is the bridging of that gap. It's to ensure that you can see that yesterday, all the things that you demonize are still important today. Rasta Village can show you the fact that we can reduce the stress that we put on our health system
Yes.
by the fact that we just eat so bad
Yes.
and we overindulge so much. You know, and the fact that, you know, our community is one that is limited on using salt, limited on using these artificial things that we have to import. So our way of life is one that can reduce all these debts that we have in our economy. And that's the essence of what communities in Jamaica can do for Jamaica. So when you come to our village, you're expected to look at a farming principle that regenerates the soil. Right there, you know, the weeds and the herbs from around you can be what gives you life. Soil regeneration. When you look at the space, you realize that all your fruits can be transformed. You know, they just fall off the trees. Right now, all our guavas are falling off all around the place. But just remember, we are making wines with them, we are making jams with them, and they are still overdoing us. We are creating guava soil.
I was about to say, because even if we don't pick it up, it goes back into the soil.
Yeah. So, and now we are making deliberate compost out of guava. So we are saying, if the government of Jamaica and the governments of the world can look at markets as a space where we use to create our own fertilizer for our own environment. When you go down to the market, just a simple garbage separation. Just to know that all organic materials go here and the other materials go there, like what people are doing in first world countries, could transform our economy in such a huge way. So the essence of Rastafari and Rastafari Indigenous Village, when you get here, is to just show you the possibility of simplicity.
Thank you very much.
Every time.
First man.
Every time.
I am coming back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right?
Yeah,
Thank you. All right.
So the diaspora can come and take a look.
I know, man. We will be
You know,
here.
of themselves.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Give thanks.